I stared at the text message on my cracked phone screen, my whole body shaking. My father's words were clear typed with the precision of a man who knew exactly how much power he held. I will have you declared mentally incompetent. I will take Ben and Mia. You will never see them again. The foster care system in this state is brutal, Sarah. Think about what you're doing. My hand trembled so violently that I almost dropped the phone. In the basement where my children and I had been locked for the past 6 hours, the temperature had dropped below freezing. Mia's lips were turning blue. Ben had stopped crying an hour ago, which terrified me more than his tears ever could. My left arm hung useless at my side, the bone broken in 2 places from where my mother had struck me with a crystal vase. The arm was swollen to twice its normal size, mottled purple and black, and I could feel the infection setting in. This was it. This was the moment I either died in this basement with my children or I fought back with everything I had left. But before I tell you what happened next, I need to say something. If you're listening to this right now and something inside you is screaming because you recognise this feeling, because you've been there too trapped and scared and thinking there's no way out, please know you're not alone. Hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, because I'm going to show you that escape is possible. Freedom is possible. And I promise you, the ending to this nightmare is worth every second of your time. So let me take you back to where it all started, back to the moment I walked into that beautiful house that became my prison, and let me show you exactly how I survived, how I fought back, and how I finally broke free. 3 years ago, my life looked nothing like it does now. I was living in a cramped studio apartment across town with my 2 kids working double shifts as a nurse at County General Hospital. The apartment had a leaky ceiling and heat that only worked half the time, but it was ours. We were struggling, sure, but we were free. Then my husband died in a car accident. Just like that, gone. The life insurance barely covered his funeral, and suddenly I was drowning in medical school debt that I had co-signed for him, rent I couldn't afford, and 2 kids who needed stability I couldn't provide. That's when my father called. Richard Morgan, attorney at law with his deep voice that commanded respect in every courtroom in the county. Come home, Sarah. Your mother and I want to help. Bring the kids. We have plenty of space. It seemed like a gift from heaven. I had been estranged from my family for nearly a decade, ever since I married Tom against their wishes. He wasn't from the right background, my mother had said. He won't amount to anything. They had been wrong about Tom. He had been the love of my life, but now he was gone, and I was desperate. I thought maybe time had softened them. I thought maybe becoming grandparents would change them. I was so wrong. The house looked exactly like I remembered. Huge, fancy, the kind of place rich people show off in magazines. Every blade of grass on the lawn was perfectly trimmed. Inside, everything looked expensive and untouchable. My mother, Margaret, opened the door in a designer sweater that probably cost more than I used to make in a month. She smiled, but her eyes stayed cold. Welcome home, dear. We have rooms ready for you in the East Wing. Just remember, we have standards here. Cleanliness is next to godliness. She leaned in like she was going to kiss my cheek, but she never actually touched me. The first week was deceptively calm. My mother asked me to help with some light housekeeping, just to earn our keep, she said sweetly. Of course I agreed. It seemed fair. I would clean, help with cooking, and in return we had a roof over our heads, and my kids had their own rooms for the first time in years. But light housekeeping quickly became an all-day affair. Every surface had to be spotless. Every corner had to pass my mother's white glove inspection. If she found a single dust particle on a picture frame, she would make me re-clean the entire room. The house is a reflection of who we are, Sarah. Do you want people to think we're slovenly? My sister Emily was even worse. 23 years old, with a trust fund she had done nothing to earn, and an Instagram following she seemed to value more than human decency. She had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. While I was in nursing school working night shifts, Emily was getting her MRS degree, as she liked to joke hunting for a wealthy husband at expensive charity galas. She moved back home after her engagement fell through, and she treated me like hired help from day one. Sarah fetched me my phone. Sarah, I spilled wine on the carpet, clean it up. Sarah, make yourself useful for once. When I tried to talk to her like a sister, she would laugh in my face and record me on her phone. Look at this, she would caption her Instagram stories, my older sister, the charity case. Living the high life off mum and dad's generosity. Her followers would leave comments calling me a leech, a burden, a failure. But I endured it. I endured it because Ben and Mia were finally in a good school district. They had warm beds, 3 meals a day, and I thought I could handle my mother's criticism and Emily's cruelty if it meant my kids were taken care of. I was wrong about that too. The real nightmare began about 6 months in. I had finally saved enough from a part-time telehealth nursing job to start looking for our own place again. I made the mistake of mentioning it at dinner. Oh, I said, casually trying to sound optimistic, I think by spring we might be able to move into our own apartment. Nothing fancy, but it would be ours. The silence that followed was deafening. My father set down his wine glass with deliberate precision. My mother's face went rigid. Emily smirked like she knew something I didn't. "You're not going anywhere," my father said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly calm. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder, sliding it across the mahogany dining table. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside were documents, legal documents, custody petitions, psychiatric evaluations with my name on them that I had never consented to, witness statements from neighbours I had never spoken to, claiming they had seen me neglect my children, claiming they had heard me screaming at them, claiming I was unstable. All lies, but they looked official. They looked real. "Let me explain something to you, Sarah," my father continued, cutting into his filet mignon, like we were discussing the weather. "I have been practicing law in this county for 35 years. I play golf with the family court judges. I sit on the board with Child Protective Services directors. If you try to leave, if you even think about taking those children out of this house, I will file these documents within hours. I will have you declared an unfit mother. I will have Ben and Mia placed in foster care while the case is pending, and cases like this can drag on for years. Do you know what happens to children in the foster system, Sarah? Especially in the underfunded facilities in this state. They get lost, they get hurt, and you will never see them again." I felt the room spinning. "This cannot be real," I whispered. "You're my father. These are your grandchildren." My mother laughed, actually laughed. "Oh, don't be so dramatic, dear. We're doing this for your own good. You clearly can't take care of yourself or those children properly. This way, they'll grow up with the advantages they deserve and you'll learn your place. Now finish your dinner. The salmon is getting cold." That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. I Googled everything I could about parental rights custody battles, false accusations. The more I read, the more I realised my father was right. With his connections and resources, he could absolutely make good on his threats. I had no money for a lawyer. I had no proof that I was a good mother beyond my own word. And who would believe me over Richard Morgan, respected attorney pillar of the community? So I stayed, and I endured. And as the months went by, the abuse escalated. It started with verbal attacks. My mother would criticise everything from how I dressed, always in cheap clearance rack clothes, disgusting, to how I spoke, "You sound like you were raised in a trailer park." When guests came over for my mother's elaborate tea parties and dinner soirees, I was expected to serve in silence, to be invisible, to make the wealthy women of her social circle feel superior. They would gossip about their charity work while I refilled their champagne, never once acknowledging my existence. Sometimes they would comment to my mother as if I couldn't hear them. "You're so generous, Margaret, taking in your daughter and her little ones. Such a burden that must be." My mother would sigh dramatically and say, "Well, family is family, even when they disappoint us." The physical abuse started gradually. At first it was just a push here, a shove there. My mother shoving me into the counter because I had folded the napkins wrong for her dinner party. Emily tripping me in the hallway and laughing as I fell, recording it for her social media. But then it got worse, much worse. The incident that changed everything happened on a freezing February evening. My mother was hosting one of her famous winter soirees, a gathering of the local elite in our community. The house had to be absolutely perfect. I had been cleaning for 3 days straight, barely sleeping, making sure every surface gleamed. My mother inspected everything with her usual critical eye, running her finger along baseboards, checking for water spots on crystal glasses. When she found a single tiny smudge on one of the Waterford champagne flutes, she didn't say a word. She just picked it up and smashed it across my face. I felt the sharp sting before I registered what had happened. Blood poured from my nose, splattering onto the imported hardwood floors. The pain was incredible, radiating through my skull. I stumbled backward, my hand flying to my face. But my mother wasn't concerned about me. She was staring at the floor, at the drops of blood on her precious oak planks. "You filthy animal," she hissed. "Look what you've done. Do you know how much these floors cost? They were imported from Denmark. Get on your hands and knees and clean it up. Now." I dropped to the floor, dizzy from the blow, and started wiping up my own blood with paper towels. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold them. That's when Emily walked in, dressed in a designer gown for the party, her makeup flawless. Instead of showing any concern, she pulled out her phone. "Oh, this is perfect," she said, starting to record. "Look at her, everyone. My sister the maid." She posted it to her Instagram story with the caption, "When you take in charity cases and they make a mess. #family burden. #real life." Her followers ate it up, laughing at my humiliation. The party went on as scheduled. I was expected to serve the guests with my nose still swollen and bruised. If anyone noticed, they didn't say anything. In their world, staff was meant to be invisible anyway, and that's clearly what I had become. Just another piece of furniture in the Morgan house, something to be used and discarded. I moved through the evening like a ghost, refilling wine glasses, passing hors d'oeuvres, clearing plates. My mother glided through the crowd in her Chanel suit, accepting compliments on her beautiful home, her impeccable taste, her generous spirit for taking in her less fortunate family members. After that night, I started to plan. I couldn't keep living like this. More importantly, I couldn't let my children grow up witnessing this abuse, thinking it was normal, thinking it was what family looked like. But every plan I came up with hit the same wall. My father's legal threats, his connections, his power. I had no money saved because my mother had convinced me to put all my earnings into a joint account with her for the household expenses she had said. An account I discovered I had no access to. I had no car because mine had broken down months ago and my father refused to help me fix it. "You have nowhere to go anyway," he had said with a shrug. I was completely dependent on them exactly as they wanted. Then came the breaking point, the incident with Ben and the chicken leg. It was during another one of my mother's dinner parties, this one for the local Republican Women's Club. Ben, my sweet 8-year-old boy, who was always hungry because my mother rationed the children's food, saying she wouldn't raise fat, undisciplined grandchildren, had snuck into the kitchen. He was so hungry he was crying. While I was in the dining room serving the guests, he grabbed a piece of fried chicken from the platter waiting to be served. Just one piece. He was so small, so thin from months of controlled portions, and he just wanted to stop the gnawing pain in his stomach. My mother found him. I heard his scream from the dining room. I ran toward the sound, my heart pounding, and found my mother dragging Ben by his arm toward the bathroom. "I'm going to teach you about stealing," she was saying, her voice eerily calm. "We don't tolerate thieves in this family." She had a hair straightener in her other hand, plugged in the ceramic plates, glowing red hot. Something in me snapped. Every ounce of fear, every moment of submission, every second of abuse, I had endured it all, crystallized into pure primal rage. I didn't think. I just acted. I grabbed the heavy crystal flower vase from the hallway table and swung it at my mother. It connected with her arm, the one holding the straightener, and she dropped it with a shriek. The vase shattered. She turned on me with fury I had never seen before, and for a moment I thought she might actually kill me. She grabbed my left arm and twisted it with all her strength. I heard the crack, felt the bone snap like a dry branch. The pain was beyond anything I had ever experienced. I screamed. Ben screamed. And then my father and Emily came running. What happened next is a blur of violence. My father grabbed me by the throat, choking off my air, his face purple with rage. "How dare you attack your mother in her own home?" he was yelling. Emily joined in, pulling my hair, clawing at my face with her manicured nails. They dragged me, still clutching my broken arm, toward the basement stairs. Ben and Mia were crying, trying to reach me, but my mother held them back. "Your mother is having an episode," she told them sweetly, as if she was discussing a minor inconvenience. "She needs to calm down in the quiet room." The children were sobbing as my father shoved me down the stairs. I tumbled, hitting each step my broken arm, screaming with agony. Emily followed with the kids, throwing them down after me like bags of garbage. The basement door slammed shut. I heard the deadbolt slide into place, and then silence. The basement of my parents' house was unfinished, just concrete floors and walls. There was no heating. The temperature outside was below freezing, and it felt almost as cold down here. Ben and Mia huddled against me, shivering. My arm was swelling rapidly, the bone clearly displaced. I could see it sitting at an unnatural angle beneath the skin. The pain was making me nauseous, making it hard to think clearly. But I had to think clearly. This was it. We were going to die down here if I didn't do something. That's when I remembered the phone. Months ago, when I still had hope of leaving, I had hidden an old smartphone in a box of the kids' toys that I had been allowed to keep in the basement storage area. It was a prepaid phone with limited minutes, something I had bought secretly with cash from doing under-the-table nursing shifts at a free clinic. I had hidden it away, hoping I would never need it, but knowing I might. With my good arm, I dug through the boxes, ignoring the screaming pain from my broken one until I found it. The battery was low, but it was on. I had 3% left. I could call 911, but my father would talk his way out of it. He would say I had attacked my mother unprovoked. He would show them his carefully prepared documents proving I was unstable. The local police knew him, respected him. They would take his side. I needed someone who couldn't be bought, someone who wouldn't be swayed by my father's reputation. I needed David. David Chen was a lawyer. I had gone to nursing school with someone who had become a friend during those difficult years. We had stayed in touch sporadically after I moved back home, just occasional emails checking in. He worked for a non-profit legal aid organisation, now fighting for people who couldn't afford lawyers, taking on powerful people who abused their positions. He had given me his number a few months back just in case. He had said, "I think you might need help someday." I hadn't wanted to believe him then. Now I knew he was right. My fingers shook as I dialed. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. "Please pick up," I whispered. "Please." Finally his voice. "Sarah, is that you?" The concern in his voice nearly broke me. I started talking, the words tumbling out in a rush, telling him everything. Where I was, what had happened, the documents my father had, the threats, my broken arm, the children freezing beside me. David listened without interrupting, and when I finished he was quiet for just a moment. Then he said with absolute certainty, "I'm coming to get you. But Sarah, we need evidence. Real, undeniable evidence. Can you document anything?" The phone was down to 1%. I used what little battery I had left to take photos, my broken arm grotesque and swollen. The bruises covering my body, some fresh, some faded yellow and green from previous beatings. Ben's thin frame, his ribs visible through his shirt. Mia's arms covered in finger-shaped bruises from where my mother had grabbed her too hard. I took photos of the locked basement door, the bare concrete floor, the single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. I took a photo of the text message my father had sent me earlier. Then the phone died. It went black in my hand, and I was plunged into semi-darkness with only that one weak bulb. But I had done it. I had evidence. Now I just had to survive long enough for David to do something with it. The hours crawled by. Ben and Mia finally fell asleep, pressed against me for warmth. I couldn't sleep. My arm hurt so badly I could barely think straight. I was burning up with fever. The broken bone was getting infected, and I knew that could kill me if I didn't get help soon. I held my babies close and whispered that everything would be okay, that help was coming, that we'd get out of this. I'm not sure they believed me. I barely believed it myself. Around midnight, I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps, voices. My heart began to pound. Were they coming back to finish what they started? Was my father coming down to silence me permanently? But then I heard something else. Loud banging on the front door. Official voices. Police. But not the local police my father had in his pocket. These were state troopers. David had gone above the local level straight to the state authorities and the district attorney's office. The photos I had sent him had been enough to trigger an emergency response. I heard my father's voice smooth and confident. "Officers, there must be some mistake. This is a private residence. We haven't called for any assistance." Then a woman's voice, cold and professional. "Mr. Morgan, we have a warrant for emergency protective custody and a warrant to search these premises. We have evidence of assault, unlawful imprisonment and child endangerment. Step aside or you will be arrested for obstruction." The basement door flew open. Light flooded down the stairs, blinding after hours in near darkness. A female state trooper in full uniform came down carefully, her hand on her weapon. When she saw us, her professional mask slipped for just a second, and I saw genuine horror flash across her face. "Oh my God," she breathed. Then into her radio. "I need medical down here immediately. Female victim with obvious severe trauma, 2 minors showing signs of neglect and abuse." She crouched down next to me. "Ma'am, my name is Officer Rodriguez. You're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." What happened next felt like a dream. Paramedics swarmed the basement. Someone gently took my children from me, wrapping them in warm blankets. A paramedic with kind eyes examined my arm and immediately called for a gurney. "This needs surgery," he said quietly. "You're going to be okay, but we need to move fast." As they loaded me onto the stretcher, I saw them. My family. My mother standing in the foyer in her silk robe, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "How dare you bring the police to my home?" she was screeching at someone. "We are respected members of this community." Emily crying for once, but not out of remorse. She was crying because her phone had been confiscated as evidence, because the police were photographing the house, because her perfect Instagram life was crumbling. And my father, Richard Morgan, the great attorney, standing in handcuffs as an officer, read him his rights. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." He looked at me as they carried me past him. Just looked at me. And I looked back, and I didn't look away. For the first time in 3 years, I didn't look away. I met his eyes, and I felt something shift inside me. I wasn't afraid anymore. They had taken everything they could take from me, and I was still here. I was still standing. Well, technically, I was being carried, but the point stood. I had survived. The next weeks were a blur of hospitals, police interviews, and emergency court hearings. My arm required 2 surgeries to repair. They had to insert metal plates and screws. The doctors said I was lucky I hadn't lost the arm entirely. The infection had been caught just in time. While I was recovering, David worked tirelessly building the case against my family. It turned out that my father's house had security cameras throughout, cameras he had installed to monitor me and the children, to make sure we weren't stealing anything or breaking his precious rules. He had never expected those cameras to be used against him. David subpoenaed every single recording. Hours and hours of footage showing my mother hitting me, Emily pouring water on me while I cleaned my father, threatening me, the children being denied food, all of it. Every moment of abuse captured in crisp, high definition. The neighbours came forward too, people I had never spoken to, people who had attended my mother's parties and seen how I was treated. They told the court about the screaming they heard, the sounds of things breaking, the way I was paraded around like a servant at social gatherings. Some of them admitted they had suspected abuse, but hadn't wanted to get involved, hadn't wanted to believe that respected people like the Morgans could do such things. Their guilt drove them to finally tell the truth. The testimony painted a devastating picture. The trial was swift. With the video evidence, the medical reports, the witness statements, and the photos I had taken that night, there was no defence my father's expensive legal team could mount. They tried, of course. They claimed I had a history of mental instability, but David countered with testimony from my former colleagues at County General, from Ben and me as teachers, from anyone who had known me before I moved back into that house. They all described me as stable, loving, devoted to my children. The fabricated psychiatric reports my father had prepared were exposed as fraudulent, ordered by him without my knowledge or consent. That alone added charges of falsifying documents and attempted custody fraud to his list of crimes. When the verdict came down, I was there in the courtroom with David beside me. My arm was still in a cast, but I sat up straight, my head held high. The judge, a woman in her 60s who had seen countless abuse cases in her career, looked directly at my parents as she spoke. In all my years on the bench, she said, her voice filled with disgust, I have rarely seen such calculated systemic cruelty, especially toward one's own daughter and grandchildren. You used your wealth, your social standing, and your legal knowledge not to help your family, but to imprison and torture them. You are a disgrace to everything this court stands for. Richard Morgan was sentenced to 8 years in state prison for assault, unlawful imprisonment, child endangerment, and falsifying legal documents. Margaret Morgan received 6 years for assault, child abuse, and conspiracy. Emily, as an adult participant in the abuse, received 3 years in county jail and 5 years of probation. All of their assets were frozen. The house, that perfect suburban mansion with its imported floors and crystal chandeliers, was sold to pay restitution to me and my children. Every piece of furniture, every painting, every luxury item auctioned off. The money went into a trust fund for Ben and Mia's future, and into paying for the years of therapy we would all need. The community's reaction was exactly what my mother had always feared most: the shame, the scandal. Her social circle abandoned her immediately. The women who had sipped champagne in her parlour and gossiped about their charity work refused to acknowledge they had ever known her. Her name was removed from every club membership, every foundation board. Emily's Instagram following, which she had valued more than her own family, vanished overnight. People sent her hateful messages calling her out for the abuse she had documented and posted. Her life as an influencer was over. She lost her wealthy boyfriend, her apartment, everything. Last I heard, she was working at a chain restaurant in another state trying to hide from her past. As for me, that's when my real journey began. The journey of healing, of learning to trust again, of remembering who I was before I became a victim. David helped me find a good therapist who specialised in trauma from family abuse. The kids started therapy too. Ben stopped flinching every time someone raised their voice. Mia started eating normally again, no longer terrified that food would be taken away from her. We moved to a small coastal town, 3 hours away, somewhere with no memories, no ghosts of the past. I got a job at a community health centre, back to nursing, back to helping people, which had always been my calling. The house we rent is small, nothing like the mansion I grew up in or the prison I had lived in with my parents. But it's filled with light and laughter. The kids have friends now. Real friends, not the carefully curated rich kids my mother wanted them to associate with. We go to the beach on weekends. We have movie nights where we eat popcorn in bed and make a mess and nobody gets hit for it. Sometimes I still wake up from nightmares, still expect to hear my mother's critical voice or feel Emily's shove. But then I remember where I am. I remember that I'm free. My arm healed, though it aches when it rains, and the scars are permanent. Sometimes I look at those scars and I see them differently, not as marks of shame, but as proof of survival, proof that I fought back, proof that when it mattered most, when my children's lives were at stake, I found the courage I didn't know I had. I saved us. Not a knight in shining armour, not some external force. Me, I saved us. I still have the old phone, the one I used to call David that night. I keep it in a drawer, the screen cracked from when I dropped it in the hospital, the battery long dead. But I keep it because it reminds me of something important. It reminds me that even in your darkest moment, even when you think there's no way out, there's always a choice. There's always one more call you can make, one more step you can take, one more breath you can fight for. You are stronger than you know. Your circumstances do not define your worth. And no matter how much power someone has over you, they can never take away your dignity unless you give it to them. I never gave it to them, not really. Even on my knees, scrubbing blood off imported floors, even locked in that basement with a broken arm, there was a part of me that remained mine. The part that loved my children fiercely. The part that knew this wasn't right, wasn't normal, wasn't acceptable. The part that refused to let my kids think this was what love looked like. That part kept me alive long enough to fight back. And when I finally fought back, I discovered something. My parents, for all their money and connections and power, were paper tigers. The moment someone stood up to them, the moment their abuse was dragged into the light, they crumbled. All bullies do. So here's what I want you to know. If you're in a situation like I was, if you're trapped by someone who uses money or legal threats or family obligations to control you, please hear this. You are not alone. You are not crazy. You are not overreacting. And there is help available. Reach out to domestic violence hotlines, contact legal aid organisations, document everything you can. Take photos, save messages, keep records. Build your case quietly and carefully. And when the moment comes, when you're ready, fight for yourself the way I fought for my children. Fight with everything you have. Because freedom is worth fighting for. Your life is worth fighting for. Your children's future is worth fighting for. The system isn't perfect. I was lucky that David knew how to navigate it, that the state troopers took the case seriously, that the judge saw through my father's lies. Not everyone gets that lucky. But every story like mine that gets told, every abuser who gets held accountable, it makes it a little bit easier for the next person. It chips away at the idea that wealth and status put you above the law. It shows other victims that they can survive, that they can win. Today, Ben is 12 and Mia is 10. They're good kids, resilient kids. They still have nightmares, sometimes still have moments where old fears resurface. But they're healing. They know what a healthy home looks like now. They know that disagreements don't have to end in violence, that mistakes don't result in cruelty, that love shouldn't hurt. I'm teaching them something my parents never taught me. That they have inherent worth simply by existing. That their voices matter. That they should never accept mistreatment from anyone, family or otherwise. As for me, I'm still healing too. Probably will be for the rest of my life. But I'm okay with that. Healing isn't linear. Some days are harder than others. Some days I'm strong and confident and proud of how far I've come. Other days I'm terrified, convinced that somehow my father will get out of prison early and come after me, that I'll open the door and see him standing there. My therapist says that's normal, that trauma rewires your brain, and it takes time to rewire it back. So I'm patient with myself. I celebrate the small victories. The first time I spoke up for myself at work without apologising. The first time I set a boundary with someone and didn't feel guilty about it. The first time I looked in the mirror and saw a survivor instead of a victim. I want to leave you with this question. Have you ever stayed in a situation that was hurting you because you were afraid of what would happen if you left? Have you ever let someone treat you poorly because they convinced you that you deserved it or that you had nowhere else to go? If the answer is yes, know this. You deserve better. You deserve respect, kindness, safety, and love. And it's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to walk away from people who diminish you, even if those people are family. Blood doesn't give anyone the right to abuse you. And leaving doesn't make you selfish or ungrateful. It makes you brave. If this story touched you in any way, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has, please share it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below telling me what you think. Have you ever had to escape from a toxic situation? What gave you the strength to leave? I read every comment and your stories inspire me to keep sharing mine. Together we can break the silence around family abuse. Together we can show others that there is life after trauma, that there is hope after darkness, that there is freedom waiting on the other side of fear. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, you are stronger than you think, braver than you believe, and worthy of so much more than you've been told. Stay safe, stay strong, and never give up on yourself.